de nuestro país. Vengan, escuchen todas las historias, historias de amor, love, aventuras, adventures, and all the bad things and good things that happen to the people of our place. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Voces de Nuestro País, or in the English language, it's Voices of the Northern Rio Grande, right?
Right. Well, that's the project overview is Voices of the Northern Rio Grande, and this event is Voces de Nuestro País, so Voices
like
of our
that.
area.
Anyway, for those of you who do not know, I'm Michael Rael, and I am the MC simply because I can be louder than anybody else. That's why Claire put me here. So anyway, today we're really fortunate. We have Kenny LaCome and Daniel Lamb. Kenny from Puesta, Daniel Lamb from Red River, with great stories of life and all that. So without further ado, Kenny, you want to start the show?
Sure. Well, it's an honor to be here, and you might be surprised by this, but I'm not here to talk. So maybe we might have a moment of silence. No, I'm actually here to share today. So I'm in so much gratitude for the opportunity to be here and share in this way. And this is what I've been choosing to actually do in life. And so to me, it's actually a practice. And I'm grateful to be here practicing today, doing this. And so glad that everyone here has taken the time to show up, because it's not about Kenny at all. It's about all of us as a community. And so that's what it's about. And if it wasn't for all of you showing up, I mean, honestly, this wouldn't be happening. So thanks again. Appreciate everybody taking the time to do it. And so basically, I'm Kenny LaCome, and I grew up in Taos. Had a great upbringing growing up in Taos, and so grateful to grow up in Taos. I had an interesting childhood growing up, and so I'll share that right away. And basically, my parents split up when I was between 6 and 7 years of age. And I don't know what happened to Kenny, but between the ages of 7 and 9, something took place in my life, and it's pretty much gotten me to where I'm at today. And so, so grateful for that. But anyway, what happened during that time is I don't know if I recognized the value of money or what it was, but all of a sudden I decided that I wanted to become like this little boy entrepreneur. So it was like, next thing I know, I just like took on this energy to ask people, you know, if I could pull weeds in their yard or mow their yard or whatever it was. And one thing led to the next. And next thing you know, I was sounding the Taos News in Taos, and shining shoes on the Taos Plaza, and had the opportunity to shine shoes for Psyche Caraves, who was the owner of the La Fonda Hotel there on the plaza, and had the opportunity to shine shoes for R.C. Gorman, you know, all these different people. And anyway, so I just took on all these little jobs. I mean, from washing the windows on the art galleries to sweeping the sidewalks. There was a doctor there by the name of Dr. Dominguez. Next thing I know, I don't know how he trusted me, but these people just had so much confidence in this little boy. And but there I was, being Dr. Dominguez's little boy janitor or whatever, and he allowed me to go into the office and clean up the office and all these little things, and having the opportunity to clean some of these art galleries, sweep the sidewalks, and wash the windows. And all of a sudden, later on in life, I realized, well, gee, this is what professionals are doing today. I mean, they've got professional window washing businesses, this and the other. Little did I know what I was actually up to at such a young age. And well, anyway, it just so happens through all these little jobs and so forth that I was walking home from the Taos Plaza Shining Shoes one day. We were living on Montoya Street and walking down Kit Carson Road, and next thing I know, I see these people like working on this building that I thought was abandoned. And there goes Getty, like, what are you up to? And they're like, we're going to open up a motorcycle shop. And boy, I just flat out lit up. Like, well, I can help, I was like, I can help you paint or wash the windows or sweep or whatever. I'd like to have a job. And they're like, you're hired. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I'm like, well, I've got a mini bike. So anyway, they hired me on at 50 cents an hour. And so there I was, I mean, still, selling newspapers every now and then and shining shoes and learning how to start working on motorcycles. And it was quite an experience. And so, I mean, it was like, that was my life. I mean, I was like, why do I have to go to school? I mean, I've got a job. I mean, all I heard was that you got to go to school to get a job. And I'm like, I already have a job. I mean, so it kind of like, I don't know. It kind of interfered with my schooling, I can say, in a way, but that's just how it went. And so next thing I know, I'm learning how to work on motorcycles, and I all of a sudden decided I want to get into racing motorcycles like motocross. And so I started racing motocross as well. And next thing I know, the motorcycle shop that I was working for, they gave me a full sponsorship, which meant a new motorcycle each season and supplying me with a vehicle to get the motocross races and supplying all the parts required to do all the repairs on the motorcycles. And I mean, I had a full sponsorship through Taos Cycle Works. And that's pretty much where my life went. I mean, going to school and actually being involved in high school sports and motocross racing and having the opportunity to grow up with these guys who are into motocross are a little bit older than I was, and them willing to take me under their wing, and at the same time traveling with them and having the opportunity to go to different races with them. And it was just amazing opportunity to grow up with these great guys. I mean, that allowed this teenager to go with them and travel with them to these different races. And so it was a great opportunity. And so anyway, when I was working for Taos Cycle Works, Terry Corrali, who was the owner of that place, he was a former motorcycle road racer. And when I met him, he wasn't racing motorcycles anymore, but he had his motorcycles in the chicken coop. And I used to go look at these things in his chicken coop, and I'm just like, wow, I'd sure like to ride one of those. And he's like, I know one of these days you're going to be a motorcycle road racer. I can see it in your eyes. I can definitely see it in your eyes. I was like, well, I had no idea that I was actually going to become a motorcycle road racer. But it got to the point where I just didn't know anything about nutrients, nourishment, nothing. Pretty much just grew up on the basic, what we know here in the United States nutritional program. And So basically, by the time I was 18 years old, I started experiencing a weakness in my knees, and from motocross, and I also got involved in 100-mile desert races on a motocross bike, doing 100-mile desert races. And so it just so happens that my knees were definitely getting a workout, and through it all, I ended up getting really weak and things like that. So when after this time, I decided when I was about between 19 and 20 years of age, I decided to move up to the Northwest, and got involved in taking classes up there on how to road race motorcycles. And so that's what I did, and learned how to road race motorcycles up there in Portland, Oregon, and was racing in Portland, and we'd travel up to Kent, Washington, and we'd road race up there and back and forth. And so then I decided that I was going to move from Portland, Oregon back to New Mexico, and I had such a passion for road racing motorcycles at that time that I decided that I wanted to continue road racing motorcycles, and as a result, I was road racing motorcycles in 1983 in Aspen, Colorado, and on August 14th is when I crashed a motorcycle and ended up with a spinal cord injury. And so, but it's a really deep story. It wasn't just a motorcycle crash and ending up in a wheelchair. The thing is prior to the motorcycle crash, I was living here in Cuesta, and one day I was walking around in my yard, and I just started thinking, gee, everybody thinks that I'm doing great in life, but I didn't think I was doing that great. Even having at that time I was working construction and racing motorcycles, and I don't know, I just started taking a look at my life, and I'm just like, there's more to life than what I'm doing, but what is it? I mean, what is it? I have no clue. I only knew what I knew, and that was it. I didn't know any more than that. So this is simply what I did is I'm walking around in the yard, and I'm like asking myself, well, everybody thinks I'm doing great, but I don't think I'm doing that great. There's more to life, but what is it? And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to continue living life, working like 9 to 5 or whatever, and take a vacation every now and then, and whoop-de-doo, it's like, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I don't know about this. I don't know, I just had this, like, these thoughts coming through, and so all of a sudden, little did I know the next step that was actually going to happen from this. All of a sudden, one day, I decided to hop in my clothes closet, which I took that as like a sacred space. And I literally got on my hands and my knees and made sure that the closet was pitch dark. And it was daytime when I did this. So I got into this closet, and this is what I did. I said, God, I want you to prove it to me that you are real and that you do exist. I could care less how disastrous it is. But I'm at a point in my life right now where I don't know if I really believe in mankind, and I feel like I'm confused, and I want to go through life with clarity. I don't want to go through life with confusion. And that's when, it wasn't 2-3 months later, I wake up laying flat on my back on the side of this racetrack in Aspen, Colorado. It was my 5th race of the day. And I don't think that they should have allowed somebody back then to race that many races in one day. I think I was just simply abusing myself, even though I was young, and I was enjoying what I was doing, but at the same time, I think I was too young and just was determined to race. But I'd already taken 3 first place finishes on this particular day. Like, that's not enough. I mean, it's like, and 1 4th place finish. And when I crashed the motorcycle, I was actually in 5th place. When I went off the racetrack and hit a boulder head on and ended up getting ejected off the motorcycle. And this probably happened at about, I don't know, just a guess, I'd say at least 50 to 60 miles an hour, I'm thinking. That I exited the racetrack and acted like I was motocrossing and stood up on the foot pegs to control the motorcycle. I didn't even see the boulder, so I guess I must have been put into shock at that point. Hit the boulder head on, got ejected off the motorcycle, ended up landing flat on my back, and got the air knocked out of me and got my breath back, and there I was laying flat on my back and could feel my legs going numb. And as this is happening, I'm just like, wow. Through all the trauma that I was experiencing, it's like, Kenny, what you asked for in that closet, you just got it.
Wow.
I mean, it was like, through all the trauma I was experiencing at that time, just to have such clarity that what happened in the closet is what I'm experiencing. And so anyway, next thing I know, I find out that my spinal cord is injured and pretty much is going to be using a wheelchair for the rest of my life, is what I was told. And so, but at this time I had like this idea that I was going to walk again, and but at the same time I distracted myself because there was so much negativity while I was in the hospital that you're never going to walk again, you're never going to walk again. And I kind of got programmed into my subconscious and didn't really know at the time what was actually happening. So I chose to just start using the wheelchair and started using the wheelchair, and a whole new life was ahead of me. But the coolest thing is the fact that remembering what I asked about in the closet basically enhanced my life, because I took responsibility and didn't blame the racetrack or the racing organization, didn't even blame myself, didn't blame anyone. I just took responsibility and said, look, what you asked for in that prayer closet, that's exactly what you're experiencing right now. And all I did was just take full responsibility and didn't blame it on anyone or anything. And all I can say is what people look at as like a tragedy, it transformed my life. I mean, it was like, I look back on what the simple words that I was able to speak, but yet how meaningful and how significant it's been to my life. I mean, it's just like when I was there in the yard walking around, wondering what I was actually going to do with my life. And I guess basically what I was seeking is, what I realized was my spirituality. And that's what's enhanced the quality of my life today, is just knowing that there was way more to life than what I knew. And it had to do with spirituality, consciousness, awareness. And I mean, little did I know what was actually going to happen. But I've been able to like live a life now that I can't even imagine how I would be living today, or even whether I'd even be alive today. I mean, it's, I mean, for me to be up here speaking, I mean, it's just such a blessing. I mean, and I'm in gratitude every single day. And I mean, to be saying this in this position, but that's just how it is. I realize that I'm able to experience joy, peace, love, freedom, fulfillment, empowerment through all of this. And that in itself, I mean, is so freeing. And the life that I've been able to live, I mean, it's just been amazing, amazing. I didn't know that, I never imagined that I'd ever be skiing down a mountainside on a sit ski. I never imagined that whatsoever. I mean, it's like, wow. Just so happens that after the motorcycle crash, I was in Aspen, Colorado, and they flew me to Grand Junction, Colorado, where I went into the hospital there, and then I got introduced to rehabilitation there, and while I was in rehab, they started bringing in other people that have been dealing with quadriplegia or paraplegia, things like that, into my room because they thought I was a nutcase. And the reason that is because they actually had me on morphine. And I guess when they had me on the morphine, I guess it just really affected who I am. And they didn't know what was actually going to happen to Kenny, and they were all concerned about, is this guy going to lose it mentally, or what's actually going to happen here? And once they took me off the morphine, I was a completely different individual. And they just were like, wow, this guy's like accepting this whole thing, and he just wants to start moving on with life. And so anyway, it was the most beautiful thing to hear that I was able to change my attitude and who I was being off that drug, morphine, and okay, it's time to get on with life here. And that's why they started asking these quadriplegics and paraplegics to come in to like talk to Kenny. They didn't know how he was going to handle the situation. But once I was off the drug, they just like, this guy's a whole new person. So anyway, I started getting introduced to what people are doing in life, living, using wheelchairs. And it was really inspiring for these gentlemen to come into my room to share. Anyway, this one guy shared with me, like, Kenny's like, people are skiing on these sit ski things, and there's wheelchair tennis, and there's wheelchair basketball, and there's all these things you can still do in your life. And I'm just like, okay, exciting. And so anyway, after I went through rehab in Grand Junction, Colorado, and this was really something. I was actually considering quitting road racing motorcycles. And the reason that is because the guy that I worked for at the motorcycle shop when I was a teenager, he mentioned to me one day, he says, Kenny, he says, I know you're going to become a motorcycle road racer. He says, let me just tell you one thing. I said, what's that? He says, if you start crashing consistently, the best thing to do, he says, is quit. Because if you don't quit, you're going to kill yourself. And I always remembered that. It so happens that this particular summer in 1983, I had already crashed 2 times prior to the crash where I injured the spinal cord. And I started considering, maybe I ought to just quit racing motorcycles. So I canceled my motorcycle racing insurance. And so
Oh,
here
no.
I end up
Oh, no.
on the side of the racetrack.
Oh,
Come to find out, paralyzed. And I'm flying me to a hospital, and then they're. And so basically, I go through the hospital and learning how to do things in a wheelchair. And they're like, we'd like you to go to rehab. And they're like, there's this place in Denver called Craig Rehab. They call them up, and they're like, we're not going to accept him. There's no way. He doesn't have any insurance. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm here at St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I can do my rehab here. I can just do it right here. And they're like, okay, cool. If you want to do your rehab here at St. Mary's Hospital, we'll go ahead and rehab you here. So I guess there was also a rehabilitation center called Hilltop Rehab in Grand Junction, Colorado, and they specialize in brain injuries. They heard about Kenny at St. Mary's, and they're like, we specialize in brain injuries, but we're willing to take this guy on. We don't really work with paraplegics, but we'll go ahead and take it on. So they accepted me into Hilltop Rehab and said, look, we're going to rehab you here, and that's what they did. So I was there for about, 4 to 6 weeks, and going through rehab and learning how to use a wheelchair, and from going off curbs to learning how to climb some steps in a wheelchair, this, that, and the other. And when they asked me to go off the first curb, I'm like, I'm going to have to call home and have somebody bring my motorcycle helmet. There's no way I'm gonna go off that curb without a helmet. And they're like, okay, but we can just guide you off the curb in the wheelchair. And I was like, wow, I'm actually scared to do this. Huh, that's in Kenny? I guess so. Well, anyway, I went through Hilltop Rehab, and next thing I know, they had me doing videos there because I started thinking, gee, maybe we ought to start rehabbing paraplegics here. I mean, this guy's just going through rehab like you're making it look easy. And next thing I know, I'm getting ready to leave the rehab, and they're like, we mentioned to you and we accepted to you that we're going to take you at our own risk. And what that meant was, if I wasn't able to pay the cost for being there, that they're basically going to pay for it. And that's exactly what they did. They came to me after rehab, and they're like, we got this covered. You do not have any medical bills here at all. We're gonna cover it all. Wow. And so that's how life started unfolding. We just get in the way, and these things start, we simply just get in the way if we just simply surrender. I mean, to more than who we are, that's when things start happening. And so that's what I started learning to do, was just surrendering to my life and allowing it to all unfold. And it still continues to do that in this day and time. And we live in a benevolent universe. And once you realize that in itself takes you out of victimhood. And I didn't have to experience that because I took on the responsibility anyway, that when I was in that prayer closet, it was my responsibility for what I spoke out, and didn't realize how bold I was being at the time. So anyway, like I mentioned earlier, I got introduced to all these different types of sporting events that I could do out of a wheelchair and things like that. So when I got back home, I started learning how to use a wheelchair, and just so happens that there was this gentleman that was actually considering giving me a sponsorship when I was road racing motorcycles up in Colorado, and he was there the day that I crashed the motorcycle, and he found out where I was living, and he called me up and says, I'm going to be passing through New Mexico. I'd love to come and visit you. And I said, okay. So he came by and we visited. He's like, I had considered giving you a full sponsorship when you were road racing motorcycles. I could tell you were an independent rider. And I was there the day you crashed a motorcycle. He's like, what are you doing with your life? And I said, well, I says, I started going to what was called TVA at the time in Albuquerque, the Technical Vocational Institute. I started attending there, and because I got involved with vocational rehab through the state of New Mexico. And I told them that I wanted to open up a motorcycle shop. Like, well, you're going to have to go to business school. You can't just like open up a motorcycle shop. And I'm like, okay, whatever it takes, if that's what I got to do. So I went to Albuquerque and started taking classes in small business on how to open up a business. And next thing I know, I find out about this organization called the Albuquerque Wheelchair Tennis Team. And I'm like, oh, played tennis in a wheelchair, okay. And so being that I was already in Albuquerque and going to TVI, going to school there, I went out and started learning how to play tennis in a wheelchair. Next thing I know, they're like, all you have to do is show up to practice and we'll fly you to tennis tournaments around the United States.
Wow.
And I'm like, really? All I got to do is show up to practice and you're going to pay for everything for me to fly around the United States? They're like, yeah, we raise money and this is what we're doing. And there was, obviously other wheelchair athletes involved in Albuquerque. And sure enough, that's how it unfolded. Well, this gentleman I was talking about earlier that came from Denver to say, hey, I was at the race with you and I considered sponsoring you. Well, later on, when I finished the schooling in Albuquerque and moved back to Cuesta, he called me up again and he says, Kenny, I'm considering offering you a job in Denver. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to work for anyone. I want to do my own thing. And so here I'm getting this schooling on small business to open up a business. And I told him, you know what? I'm going to consider maybe working for someone else. I said, I'll come up to Denver and I'll look at your facilities and your shop and I'll see what's happening. I go up there and I'm just like, you know what? I think I'll come to work for you. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up moving from Cuesta to Denver and go back to work as a motorcycle technician out of a wheelchair. And it just so happens when I get there, I found out that his dad had passed away. So he's like, I got to go to Vermont to take care of this. And he says, you're welcome to stay in my home. And I don't know when I'm going to be back. And I'm like, well, I guess I won't be starting work now. Well, when I was in rehab, I had heard that people were skiing sitting down. So I go to Denver to work, have a week or two off. And I said, well, I found myself an apartment, found out about Winter Park, Colorado, went up there, and sure enough, there's people up there skiing, snow skiing, without legs, people that were blind, people missing arms, everything, people skiing sitting down. So I learned how to ski on what I call it toboggan. And so anyway, I learned how to ski on this thing, and it wasn't 4 weeks later, people are like, you ought to consider racing. I'm like, okay.
Get back to
Oh
it.
no, here we go. And
Wow.
so I take this toboggan, Winter Park lets me borrow this toboggan kind of thing, and I'm going to my first race in Powderhorn, Colorado on this thing, and end up taking a second and third place in giant slalom and slalom on this thing. Well, little did I know it actually qualified me to go to the U.S. National Adaptive Championships in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so I was like, okay. So there I go. And some of the volunteers in Winter Park are like, Kenny, if you want to get to Jackson Hole, Wyoming and go race on this thing, Winter Park is going to allow you to use the equipment and you can go up there and race. And so there I go out to my first race. 7 weeks later, after my first sit ski lesson on this toboggan thing. And people are like, well, you're just like a natural that learned how to use this thing. And I go up to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and ended up taking a second place finish overall on this thing. 7 weeks later after my first lesson.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And while I'm up there, I noticed these other sit ski things that look like you're actually skiing rather than sledding down the hill. And I'm looking around at these things and saying, you know, why doesn't somebody put a shock absorber on one of these things? And I started questioning some of the athletes there. How come you don't put shocks on these things? And they're like, oh, everybody's done that, and da-da-da, this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I says, that's okay. So I get back to Denver after the national championships, and I start thinking, gee, you know, why didn't somebody put a shock absorber on one of these sit skis? So I mentioned it to this guy in Denver, and next thing you know, we put this sit ski together with a shock absorber on it, and I take the thing up to Winter Park, and now I'm having to learn how to ski on a whole new contraption, which is a single ski with these outriggers on it. And, you know, it's off the snow a good 1.5 feet. And I'm learning, no one knew how to really teach that thing at the time, how to ski the thing. But they had people that were willing to load you onto the chairlift and take you to the top of the mountain. And my right turn came naturally, but not my left. Every time I'd go to make a left turn, I would fall right over. Did this for I don't know how many hours, at least 2 or 3. And finally it clicked, and I started linking turns and making turns. And there I was one run at the base of the mountain, and I fall over and go end over end, no helmet on, no nothing. And I'm just like, wake up, and I'm just like, wow, is this really what I want to do? And I got over that, and continued skiing. And next thing I know, I'm helping design sit skis and working on sit skis, and we come up with a design, and I go to test it in Winter Park, February 26, 1987, which was actually my birthday that day. Wasn't even focusing on that particular, it just so happened that it worked out that day that this particular design that we had come up with was ready for test. And so I went up there to go test the thing, and Hal O'Leary, who started the program up in Winter Park, Colorado, he came up to me after I skied for a couple, 3 hours, and he says, I've never noticed anyone load a chairlift on a sit ski independently. You're the first person I see do that. He says, what did you do to allow you to get on the chairlift? I said, well, we incorporated a lifting system on it. So we lift you up, so the chairlift would just pick you up, and away you go. And he's like, well, we'd like to buy 10 of these things. And I said, hold on. I says, wasn't planning on selling them. I said, but I'm going to go back to Denver. I'm going to talk to the gentleman. Him and I got involved doing this. And next thing you know, we ended up turning into a business called Enabling Technologies, building these sit skis. And so one thing led to the next. And so I ski raced that particular design for a couple, 3 years. And I'm like, you know what, there's got to be something better than this out there. And so this other guy had built a sit ski, and I told him, hey, you know, that thing seems to be skiing really well. Are you okay if I build one identical to it? So I did, and first ski race ever was I went to Park City, Utah, and hadn't even skied on the thing. Just built the thing and just believed in it. Took it up there and ended up getting a gold medal in giant slalom on that thing immediately.
Wow.
It was like, wow, yeah. But anyway, it's just been one thing after the other. And in 1987, I learned how to sit ski in 1986. In 1987, I ended up qualifying, little did I know, to be on the U.S. adaptive ski team. So I was on the U.S. adaptive ski team for probably another 3 or 4 years. That went through about the early 90s. And I'm like, okay, well, it's time for another design. And that's when a dear friend, David Dawson, who lives here in Cuesta, we got together. We met up at the Taos Ski Valley, and he's like, I'm a welder. I'm like, oh, wow, really? I said, I could definitely use a welder. And I had this other design in mind, and between David and I, we were able to get this sit ski together, which was a whole new design. And it was just time for something new and different. And I applied for a patent on it. I was granted a U.S. patent on it. And then through all the prototype stages, it started working better and better and better. And next thing I know, I have the ability to compete on this latest design. Was granted the patent in March of 2000. In 2002, I qualified to go to the Paralympic Games, the Winter Games in Salt Lake City, Utah in 2002. And have the ability to compete there and end up competing in the super giant slalom there. Ended up taking a 10th place finish while I was there. And so, I mean, all of a sudden I'm just so involved with ski racing and meeting people from around the world. And when I'm in Salt Lake in 2002, I get done competing and I meet this woman, and she told me she won 4 gold medals in cross-country skiing. And I'm like, it looked to me like she was in her late 50s. Or no, I mean, pardon me, in her late 60s. And I thought she was from Poland for some reason. Come to find out she was from Norway. So anyway, I'm like, wow, I guess you're never too old to
Never too old.
to see what cross-country skiing is about. So anyway, she inspired Kenny to get into cross-country skiing. I ended up getting into cross-country skiing about 4 years later. And it wasn't within a year I started competing in cross-country skiing. And ended up competing in cross-country skiing for over 10 seasons. It took me, I had the opportunity to go to World Cups in France and Germany. And I get to these places, and I mean, my first World Cup was in France, Bassans, France. And I get there and I'm just like, I got to compete with these guys? You got to be kidding me. They look stronger than an ox. And I'm like, I'm going to be coming in last place. Sure enough, I was like, one race I was like last place, another race I was like second or last place, whatever. And but it was the coolest thing is I looked at these people and I'm like, I want to be able to get that good. They have such amazing skill at what they're doing. I want to get that good. And it took me literally like 10 seasons to develop that skill level, because on a cross-country sit ski, I feel that it's like 1800s technology. And so anyway, going from a Alpine sit ski, one single ski using outriggers, and going to a cross-country sit ski with 2 skis on it, with no articulation, not having the ability to angulate, nothing. I mean, it was like a challenge to learn how to use this thing when I first got in the thing. But I'm like, Kenny, you're speaking out to the universe right now. You're asking for the challenges. It's not about these cosmic 2x4 experiences anymore. Well, I was looking for a new challenge in life, and sure enough, the new challenge was cross-country skiing. And so anyway, I got into it. Like I said earlier, I did it for over 10 seasons. It took Kenny about 10 seasons before I was able to medal at a national championship cross-country racing. At that national championship, I ended up earning 3 bronze medals at a national championship on a cross-country sit ski. And it took quite some time to get to that level because it's so competitive as well. Well, not only that, I mean, I'm already like in my 40s and 50s doing this, and still doing this today. I mean, in my 60s, and competing against 21-year-olds, 30-year-olds, I mean, things like that, and 40-year-olds at the most. But anyway, it's been wonderful. And between Alpine racing and cross-country racing, I've been doing it for 38 seasons total. Yeah. So anyway, it's been an amazing life. And one of the things that I'd like to leave it with is that the one thing that I learned in this transformation in my life is about nutrition. There's one thing I had no clue about. I just consider myself the biggest junk food junkie that existed. And that's a whole nother story in itself. But I've been able to maintain my health all along. I changed my nutritional program completely shortly after the motorcycle crash and injuring the spinal cord. And it was due to my brother Mike, my older brother Mike. He came up to me one day and he's like, Kenny, you plan on walking again? I said, no. I said, all I've heard is this negativity, you'll never walk again. He's like, well, I've got some news for you. Here's a testimony of a woman who healed herself by drinking wheatgrass juice. And that's a story in itself. But I haven't did what this particular woman did to heal her spinal cord. They say she fasted for 40-some days drinking wheatgrass juice and walked out of it. Well, anyway, this information is in this book called Survival into the 21st Century. I read the book and it's transformed my life. I've learned so much about nutrition, nourishment, and how important it is to stay healthy and be healthy and experience wellness in this day and time. And from what I know, and I know now how important it is, just because we're surrounded by so many chemicals in this day and time, that we have to take responsibility and purge the stuff out of our systems because we're putting it in our systems all the time. Well, wheatgrass juice has the ability to do that. And I can go on and talk about it. But the thing about it is being on more living foods rather than junk food has enhanced the quality of my life in so many ways. That's why I'd like to speak about it. But I'm going to pretty much stop here because that is in itself is a whole nother
Another hour.
or 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever. But infinite love and gratitude, and thanks for the opportunity.
Wow.
That's one hell of a life.
Wow.
And a lot of lessons in your life. Thank you. So now we move on to a different kind of feller.
Ah,
A man that grew up basically here in Red River.
Right.
So let's welcome Daniel Lamb from Red River.
Thank you. My life sounds boring in comparison. But I do have to piggyback on your discussion about diet. So those of us of a different age remember the old La Cienega Elementary.
Yes.
And we got whole pinto beans, we got whole corn, we got, and it was brilliant food. And during COVID, I got really, really sick and put on about 60 more pounds than I'm carrying today. And so about 2 years ago, I went on the calabacitas diet. It's my joke. But I literally went back to calabacitas, and I went back to the way we used to eat. Whole pinto beans, whole food, real food, nothing that came out of a box. And over that 2-year period, I stopped any sort of external medication. No blood pressure issues, no cholesterol issues, no blood sugar issues, because I'm eating real food. So I applaud your efforts. By the name of Tita Te Nawa. She is a full-blooded Cherokee woman from southern Tennessee. And I have used this as an example, and that in the United States, we can literally be the oppressed and the oppressor at the same time. So when Andrew Jackson, not a hero to my family, took away my great-grandmother's property and shipped her and 9 children, marched them walking to Oklahoma, she left Oklahoma with 9 children, got to Oklahoma with 1, my grandfather. And when I was a younger man, for those of us who do know me, I have always been precocious. I am that young man listening at the door, wanting to know what the old people were talking about. So I had heard the stories of my own families. So when I'm a little kid, I discovered that my great-grandmother had written her diary of the travel of the Trail of Tears. And it's written in Cherokee. And so when I was 6 years old, I took it to my mother and I said, and my grandfather, would you teach me this language? And they taught me the language. And I am a fortunate man. I have a gift for language. I speak a few of them. And that will be important as we get down the road. So my mother's people arrived in Taos in 1849 during the absolute worst of the Irish famine, when 1.5 million people are starving to death in Ireland, and the British government is shipping their food to other countries to sell. Kind of sounds familiar with what we're doing at oil at the moment. We can sell oil to the rest of the world, but we don't have enough for us. We have a healthy distrust of government, which is ironic, because I am the Democratic chair, precinct chair in Red River. I am proof that Red River is not filled with rich, white, Republican Texans. I'm absolute proof of that. So my mother's people moved to Taos. But my mother had spent a lifetime coming out visiting here. I actually have a few photographs. So this is my mother's family in 1932 on the John Dunn Bridge. 1932 is the absolute worst of the famine, of the Dust Bowl, and the Depression. And you can see, if you'll get a chance to look at this, these are desperate people. They are dryland farmers who live in what is called bottomland in Oklahoma. But they're moving to Taos. They come out and visit their family. I have a photograph of my mother at 16 years old at Taos Fiestas. So my mother's family have been in New Mexico a long time. But they moved to my mother meets this young man from West Texas in Taos. My father would come out and visit his family and had done deer hunting up in this region. So they get married in 1950. In 1955, my family moved up to Red River. And at the time, the road from here to Red River is dirt. So I remember the road going down into the river, crossing the river, coming up over passes. The old Red River Pass is still switchbacks. The modern road doesn't come along until 1967. And so I had the pleasure of getting to know a number of the old miners who had come up here in the late 1800s. And today, our impression of miners is that they're rustic people because of movies and television. We've forgotten a few things. The Edison mine up in Midnight is Thomas Edison. These were mining engineers. These men and women had mined all over the planet. So there was a man who rented a space from us. My parents come into Red River and buy the Three Canyon Camp, which is a series of little cabins from the late 1800s that people had rented out to miners. Nothing is winterized. So I spent my childhood digging 6 feet under to bury pipes. But these old miners would rent spaces and put their motorhomes, mobile homes, on them. And they would talk about the old days. And they would talk about mining in South Africa and Russia and Persia. These people had mined all over the planet. But Red River, we never found large, significant gold in mining up here. And so Red River very quickly begins to fall apart. The mining communities begin to fall apart. People move away. But a lot of the old miners were still alive, and a couple of them would still had active mines as a kid. And it's just remarkable. We have this idea of miners that all they did was just dig gold. But no, they had gardens, and they had flower gardens, and they had gardens in the river. And these people had full and rich lives. And just another little transition in our own lives. So back in 1972, half of this country lived in a big urban center, and half of us lived in small towns. And we forget how rich small towns are. No money. New Mexico never had any money. We know that from the get-go. We will never have any money in this world. But in New Mexico, we have an old Spanish saying is we don't talk to each other from here, we talk to each other from here. Because we are la gente, we're part of something bigger. So these old miners would talk about these sort of places, and just remarkable places. So my folks moved up in 55. Red River is just sort of limping along, and my family are literally only in Red River in the summer. Nobody lived in Red River over the winter. It just shut down. And I always thought that was sort of funny, was after the Dust Bowl and the Depression had played out, all of the bigger buildings in Red River, the old Playhouse, what is now Texas Reds, the Motherlode, the Bull of the Woods, these were illegal gambling and alcohol during the Prohibition. And there was actually a telegraph system that ran from Cuesta to Red River. So there would be somebody in Cuesta who would telegraph the revenuers are headed on their way. So they would flip these buildings into amusement places. But those things were still around when I was a kid. So they were still in the back rooms. They were still going on. So my folks move up. We move up full time in 1959 when both Red River and Taos Ski Valley both open up. And some people will remember that the people from Taos Ski Valley lived in Red River as they were building Taos Ski Valley. And there's a unique moment in time. July 17th, 1955 is the day Disneyland opened in California. And 3 men drove up from Oklahoma into Red River. And they were S.E.B. Bolton, S.E.B. Paint Company out of Oklahoma City, Garnet Fry, Trigo Sporting Goods and Western Wear Clothing out of Woodward, Oklahoma, and Woody Duffy, Old Duffy's Restaurants. They actually ran into my parents, sold them the old Three Canyon Camp, which then became the Lonesome Pine, which now becomes the Eisenhunt. But these three men decided, because amusement parks are springing up all over the United States, and those of us who are baby boomers, our families are looking for entertainment. So these guys reimagined Red River. So they sold my parents the Three Canyon Camp. They went up to Aspen and taught 35 families, German, Russian, Czech, French, Italian, an assortment of Europeans from the mountains of Europe to come down to Red River and restart the ski area, actually create the ski area. And among them was Ernie Blake, Papa and Mama Maillet from the Bavarian and Taos Ski Valley. Papa and Mama Maillet were my godparents. But they also were survivors of camps. They had numbers on their arms. So we grew up hearing the horrors of insidious fascism and how quickly it overtook Europe. And it's a time when there is no satellite TV, there's no satellite radio, there's no cable TV. So we grew up hearing these stories from the old miners of an American world that didn't exist anymore. And these European stories, they would talk about Berlin and Vienna before World War II. Some of them could talk about them before World War I, when they were the glittering capitals of these worlds. But they all had that cautionary story. There's a woman by the name of Ilse Werndl who owned the Alpine. Ilse was from Stuttgart, Germany. Her father was a wealthy publisher. And when she was turned, I think she was 13 or 14, she was given a choice to join the Hitler Youth, or join the Hitler Youth, or join the Hitler Youth. And it was her saving grace, because as she had to join the organization, they shipped her to Norway, where she spent the rest of World War II working in a dairy, summer, winter, anytime, barefoot, barely dressed, in the cold and the snow. But she's also the only family member who survived fascist Europe. So we grew up hearing these stories. But it's also a burgeoning new age in the United States. So the people who taught me how to snow ski are Ernie Blake, your cousins, his family, the LaComes, the Maillets. And so I still ski locked in step. These were old hardline Europeans. There was none of this hunted come along stuff. They would beat you with ski poles if you weren't doing it right. But it was a wonderful time. And then we started school in Cuesta. Johnny Gonzalez from the gas station, what was the Chevron. His mother was Lucia Gonzalez, my first grade school teacher. And my brothers are both Hueros and I. I have proof. I did have hair once, and it was a different color. So I actually fit better in Cuesta. But when we started school in Cuesta, I thought my name was Gringo Salao Jete Palau. And it was not unkind. It was just we were the first outsiders to go to school here. My mother's people come from Taos. We spoke a little bit of Spanish, but we were the first time. But Lucia gave her youngest son, Anthony, a nickel. Go play with the little white boy. 67 years later, he is my absolute best friend. I've known the family for decades, and we're constantly in each other's homes to this day. So our lives started to become intertwined. And Cuesta, I think when we started high school, we were the largest graduating class Cuesta had ever had at that point. I think by the time we got to senior year, we were not such a big number. But it was a big thing. Life is exploding. My dear, sweet, one of my favorite people on the planet, Pat Martinez, comes along about 4th grade, I think, and starts the band program. And I had one of the greatest pleasures of my life. I play 5 different instruments because of Pat Martinez. I get weepy at this point, and you'll have to forgive me. But 26 years ago, I came home to take care of my aging parents, and I had a chance to run into Pat Martinez. And Pat was still in good shape. And I was able to tell him thank you, that he added such value to my life. Because it wasn't fancy, it was just quiet.
Let me interrupt real quick. I saw Pat last week at the Taos Living Center. And I went up to talk to him. he doesn't even know who he is anymore.
Right.
It's really sad because Pat was one of the best influence of music this town has ever had. Incredible teacher.
He-
In fact, in Dulce, he took his group to Europe.
Right.
So that, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that I did. Pat is still here,
Yeah.
and just sad that.
So, and just along those lines, so 2 weeks ago, I actually went and stopped to visit Pat, and I had recorded a piece of music, and he remembered the piece of music.
That he did.
And so he mumbled the name of the piece of music, and so he could remember still then. He didn't remember me. I was just somebody in the background, but he remembered the good piece of music. So a lifetime in New Mexico. So my folks have owned, when we first moved to Red River, we owned a motel. And life was challenging. So both of my parents either worked at the Red River ski area or the old Powder Puff ski area. And I am the child who stayed home and read in the motel when I'm 5 years old. And in those days, we did not publish rates. So I knew if you drove up in a Chevy, you got one rate. You drove up in a Cadillac, you got a different rate. And then one day my mom came back from work, it was a weekend, and she said, and I said, Mom, I keep renting rooms, and these people come over they take the room, they go over, spend about an hour, and then they come back and say, we want our money back, we're not really needing that. And my mother explained cautiously to me, said, Dan, they're using your rooms. She didn't tell me what for, but we can imply that. And she said, Dan, you can't do that. So if they come, they're going to spend more than an hour, you don't give their money back. Because people were using the rooms for the little kid. But grew up in Red River. My family opened a ski shop in 1959. I think we are the third oldest ski shop in New Mexico run by the same family. Cottom's held number 2 until they sold out their ski shops. So we've been in the ski industry a long time. Savings, and we were in land development. Savings and loan crisis comes along, and literally the bottom fell out of Red River. I graduated school from Cuesta, and it was just a little bit before that. So my folks could not afford to send me to college. So I had an aunt and uncle who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area who said, Dan, come and live with us, and we will help you get into UC Berkeley. So I jumped at the opportunity. So there are still more people in UC Berkeley than there are in Taos County. But I went to UC Berkeley. I finished up just a bachelor's of science in marketing. I was in a 4-square seminary at the time. My father's family, the Lambs, we are descended from Scottish Quakers. We come in the 1620s. So it's very common for us to send our children to seminaries. My older brother is a retired Baptist minister today. So I go to California, get an education, but eventually come back to Red River. Savings and loan crisis hits. I have to go make a living. I have a young family. I have to move to Albuquerque. I lose a wife suddenly. I have 2 little children. I get a teaching certificate, and for the next 29 years, I taught school, waited tables nights and weekends, and went to school in Albuquerque. But I taught the history of New Mexico, and I cannot tell you how much I love New Mexico. This is where people belong. We could teach the world how to live the way it's taken us a long time, but we have figured out how to live together. But I taught the histories of New Mexico. We have the largest crypto-Jewish population on the planet because Columbus was never Italian.
No.
Columbus was a Sephardic Jew from Western Spain.
Yep.
1492 is only important because it's the year Spain becomes a Catholic country for the first time in its history. It immediately expels 2.5 million Arabs, tells 6.5 million Spanish Jews, convert, leave, or Columbus is looking for somewhere to send his own family and finds New Mexico. Because what happened in 1509, what becomes Mexico City, is still Teotihuacan, But what becomes Mexico City has an inquisition. And 35 families flee out of Mexico City because they are Sephardic Spanish Jews. They come into Las Cruces, New Mexico, and go native. And they're here when the conquistadors go marching by. So today, we have this huge population of crypto Jews around us. And there is a little tell that works most of the time, not all the time. But if your name is Gonzalez, Sanchez, Gomez, any of the Zs, the correct Spanish spelling ends in a Z. The S is a little clue where la gente, we may be a little different over here. So we have these wonderful populations. The LaCombes, the Laforets, the Fouquets, these French-sounding names that live around us are probably Basque people. And even the Spanish that we speak is a 16th century Spanish dialect that is actually almost Basque. So we have this really, really rich history in New Mexico. What a wonderful place to live in. I can't really imagine living anywhere else. And we live in this unapologetic, multicultural, multi-ethnic world because we have these rich stories of each other. So we can have adversity and they turn into triumphs in our lives. I'm suddenly preaching here. I didn't mean to go down that road.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we did. Anyway, so as I spent many years in Albuquerque, Augustine Martinez, gentleman in Taos who is the short-term director of Taos, comes to me. And at the time, I am the provost assistant in Albuquerque, and I'm teaching history. And Augustine comes in Taos, and he said, well, he's found the Clowers. I think they were originally out of Kansas, who want to build a campus in Taos. At the time, my boss, the deputy provost, and I are overseeing all of the regional campuses of UNM. So Augustine Martinez and the Clowers and I started UNM Taos because it did not exist when we were young. Our lives would have been different if we had had education, affordable education that we could have gone to. So we helped start UNM Taos. I moved home 2021 to take care of my own aging parents who were in their 70s. And had the good pleasure to live with my parents for really the last 15, 20 years of their lives. And then COVID hits us. January 2nd of 2020, my father and I are driving back from Denver, and my father is coughing. Within 2 days, he can no longer communicate. My father has COVID. I take him to our lifelong physician, Dr. Kilgore in Taos, another amazing human being. Dr. Kilgore said, Dan, your father's dying. He's got some kind of lung cancer. We don't know what this is. It is COVID. I taught pandemics to medical school students at the University of New Mexico. And so I had some idea of what we were facing. And I happened to be in San Francisco in college as the HIV/AIDS broke out. And I am in a seminary, so I'm working in the city among various populations. And at the peak of it, I can remember clearly that there was one day when 10,000 people died in San Francisco in a single day of AIDS. And the federal government is doing nothing. And someone got attention of Nancy Reagan, who then reached out to Anthony Fauci and Elizabeth Burks, whose name had been dragged through the mud. I've known these fine people for 57, nearly 50 years. So I was able to call them and find out what was going on. Said, Dan, is some kind of a COVID. We know it's deadly. We don't know its extent. We don't know how it's transmitted. My father actually survived the first round of COVID, January or February. My mother gets it. My mother is gone in 4 days. But I have a little moments of joy. My people are people of faith. We believe in a life after this. We believe in the value of a human soul. So we get my mother to a little home I have in Albuquerque. My brothers called and said, Dan, you have to come. Mom is going to pass. And I get there and they say, she's just babbling. She's not making any sense. We don't know what she's saying. And I get to my home in Albuquerque, walk into my mother, and she walks up and she sits up in bed and said, "Oh, Dan, I'm so glad you came. Our people have come for us. They're here, and it's time to go home," in Cherokee. That's why I told you the story earlier. I speak a lot of languages, but my mother is telling me quite literally that her people have come for us, and it is time to go home. And she's talking about her mother and her grandmother and Tita Te Nawa. And I love this. Tita Te Nawa's name in Cherokee literally means the wind that blows a rain cloud into our future. And my own grandmother gave me the name of Hanyon, which just means rain cloud. But I love this. But my mother is talking about her family, and she said, so-and-so is here, and Great Aunt Betty, and all these people. Some of them she would know, some of them she would have never met. But I became a history teacher because I did my own family research. I wanted to know where my people come from. We do not live in a vacuum. We are the results of generations of families. And so I realized what my mother is telling me, that my mother is about to pass. And so we talked for a few minutes, and she gets a little upset and said, "Dan, it's time to go. We have to go." And I'm talking, stalling. And then she finally said, "Daniel Lamb, get up. It's time to go home. We have to leave this place. It has bad air, bad water, and we have been here long enough. We need to move on." And I was able to tell my mother, "Mom, I can't come, but you can go ahead, and I will catch up with you later." And my mother closed her eyes and passed away. A year and a half later, my father gets multiple myeloma from COVID. And my father at that time is 94. It is not treatable. The only way they could keep him would to be permanently put him in a hospital. My father said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So he comes back to my home in Albuquerque, and Dad is beginning to see my mother. Mom, Mary came by, and he's starting to see her. And he said, "I don't want to go." And then his brother comes by. And then finally my mother comes one more time, and my dad explains to me. He said, "Dan, your mother comes by, and I think the next time she comes, I'm going to go with her." And sure enough, in a day, my father passes away. So we know where our people went. So we have those heart-wrenching, sweet moments. But, we get through that because we know who we are. We know where we come from. We know what matters to us. And at the end of the day, we live various lives, but what we see demonstrated today among the extremely wealthy, powerful people on another coast who think they have control of our lives, they do not. At the end of the day, those stories are written by people who will never love them, never care about them. But let's make sure our stories get written by the people that we love, that we care about. And my family are unapologetically Misto. So when it comes for me to pick a box, I have to pick about a dozen boxes because I am Irish, I am Scottish, there's a little English in me. My great-grandmother on my mother's side is full-blooded Cherokee. My great-grandmother on my father's side is Choctaw. In New Mexico, we are Romeros and Jaramillos and Gonzaleses. We are the best of our worlds. We are hybrids, people, all of us. So they try to put us down as that we are less, but we are more because we know where we're going. We know where we come from. And in fact, there's a small group of educators who are working, trying to show the city of Albuquerque and APS, if you will come back to young people who are in trouble, whose sole experience of life is electronic. And if we can teach a different generation, Taos is working on this at the moment, if we can go back to kids who are in trouble and teach them where they come from, because they don't know our stories. They don't know grandma's stories. They don't know their abuelita's stories. They think life is what they see now and only what you can eat and taste. But I think of Lucia Gonzalez telling me of riding a horse to Alamosa on a weekly basis and coming back and forth so she could get a teaching certificate because she knew she needed a government job. When you understand that those are your people, they weren't rich, they weren't famous, they just did what it took to raise their kids. And so it's important that we keep these stories alive. Yeah. In a nutshell, that's kind of my story. I could bore you with endless stories about New Mexico.
You have to tell them how you got rid of COVID. You remember you told me about that you got COVID and the doctor said, if I send you to the hospital, you'll die.
Exactly.
So you went home, and then what happened?
Okay, so
that one.
So
this is a great story.
Yeah, so COVID eventually took nearly 19 family members, children, grandchildren, aunts, uncles. So I got COVID, and my only health indication is today I'm a 70-year-old man, but I was asthmatic. So I got COVID, and my lungs went into full cytokine storm and tried to kill me. So my saturated oxygen went to 42. And Dr. Kilgore in Taos was my lifelong physician. He came out from Oklahoma to work in Native communities back in the 1940s. And I intended to become a physician, but life had other dimensions. So I became a doctor that can't help anybody, as my kids would have said. So I went to Kilgore, and he said, Dan, your saturated oxygen's 42. And he said, if I send you in the hospital, they will intubate you, and you will die. But he said, if you'll go home and sit on your concentrators, and by then I have the full concentrators. I'm trying to keep my people alive. And I went home and sat in a chair for nearly 3 years. I got COVID 8 more times. But I was, just little things that we know. So again, when we were young, they would teach us that you don't regrow brains, you don't regrow nerve endings. Bullshit, pardon my language, but we know better. We can regrow, we can outlive it. And I had done enough research that I was determined to outlive it. So I literally sat in a chair. I went on the Calabasitas diet because I could find my way to the refrigerator. But I put on a good bit of weight before I had to start losing weight. And eventually I just started outliving it. And so I just kept fighting back and just taking small steps. And COVID was tough in retail, in Red River. Red River has, in my lifetime, Red River has always been this odd cultural meshing. So we have Texas, Oklahoma culture meeting New Mexico culture. And they're not the same. New Mexico, we are deeply consensual. We've spent hundreds of years learning how to cooperate and how to get along. This larger American consumerism will just bowl us over. It doesn't value life. It doesn't evaluate the stories. But I literally, one day I was attacked. I'm walking around in my own store with an oxygen tank on, and I'm trying to do all the right things. So I've got a mask on. I'm wearing an oxygen tank in my own store. And a man walks in his 30s. And he said, there's no such stuff as that. And I'm an old school teacher. I'm not a soft heart. And he grabbed the oxygen tank, threw it into the street, knocked me down the stairs of my front doors. And I struggled after that. And as I got better, I really struggled. And I said, Lord, how do I go back in my own store and deal with people that I no longer trust? And I struggled with that for months. And finally, the good Lord just comes back and said, Daniel, you can't fix the world. It's my job. I'll take care of that. But you can make your corner better. And a funny thing happened to me is outliving immediate descendants. I still have brothers. My brothers have grandchildren. But outliving the people closest to me, I discovered that I could begin to expand that to other people. So we had a whole group, and I don't mean to get too political on you, but we do live where we live. So during COVID, a whole group of ultra MAGA people moved into Red River who wanted to set up barriers at each end of town, and they would determine who would come in and out of town. So we are talking people who came from gated, segregated communities in other places and thought we should become that. And my father, who had already passed away, who kept waking me up at night and said, Daniel, you have to run for town council. I always had enough sense to never, ever, ever do that. I enjoy the politics of universities. We're making something work, but just for screaming at each other, I never wanted to do it. So for several months, my father kept nagging me, waking me up, and I was, okay, I'll do it. So I go over and I registered at Taos County. Didn't tell a single one of my neighbors I was running for office, and they voted me in. So I am proof that a Norteño Democrat can win elections up there. Yeah. But those are some of my stories today. Yeah. A question, sure.
You were talking about the mines in Red River.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any history on the Carabel up Pioneer?
So actually, when I was a child, and again, I'm 70, so back in the late 50s, Carabel still had glass in the windows. It still had curtains over them. So the Carabel is actually owned by a family who live in Houston at this point. And so it's this little carve out between the town of Red River, Kit Carson National Forest, and the wilderness area. But at this point, the family had pretty well torn it down.
I understood that they brought all the material with some redwood. They only mined one gold bar. I don't know if that's true.
That is correct. So at the peak, there were about 4,000 people who actually worked at Carabel,
Wow.
but just never found much gold here. Even Thomas Edison was trying to use electricity to separate minerals, which became a thing later, but he could never generate enough electricity because not enough running water around here. So just the gold never really played out around here. And Red River really became potato fields. And what is now the center of downtown Red River was swamp grass. It was that high, just swamp. Because in Red River, the water table runs from Flag Mountain to the river. So everything was moving. But these old miners, they were amazing people. We had a gentleman by the name of Dick Kirshner. He actually owned the first color TV I ever saw. But he would talk about, and they weren't, it was not a rock'em sock'em kind of Western sort of thing. They were here making lives, planting gardens, planting flowers. They were building a future. But when the money ran out, so did they. Yeah. Anybody?
I'll tell you what, today has been one hell of an interesting day. Amazing, thank you both.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you.
And stories, you know, I don't know, that's what makes Northern New Mexico for me. Being from here all my life, this is what we want to accomplish here, is to have this kind of story so people learn about who we are. Because there's no one thing, it's all of us. So thank you both. And next week, we're going to be at the Cerro Farm, live over there.
Cool.
It's from 2 to 4, so.
Actually, we're doing it in the morning so that we're not all burning out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Thank you.
10 to 12.
Thank
Oh,
you.
well, see, now
Yes.
they finally tell me about it. I guess they didn't want me there. Anyway, next month, we're going to have Bobby Ortega.
Bobby.
And I saw him yesterday, and I said, make sure you bring Dwayne, because I said, you and I can talk all day, and if we don't have Dwayne to shut you up once in a while and do music, you'll talk all day. So he agreed. So it'll be Bobby and Dwayne be next month. And then we still have to, have you done anything with Esmeralda as far as?
No, not
Okay.
first. So
In October, I think we're going to be going to Amalia to do a show there for the Riveras and maybe other people from that area that grew up there. So I'm still putting that together with them, and then I have to get these guys to make sure they can go over there. And so thank you all. This has been the best attended.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
But so, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, all of you. We
We'll do more
appreciate it.
stories.
God bless you.
Thank you, guys.
Daniel?
Hi. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me to do this. This is fun. Would love to.
Voces de nuestro país. Vengan, escuchen todas las historias. Historias de amor, love, aventuras, adventures, and all the bad things and good things that happen to the people of our place. You have listened to the stories. Vayan y digan a todos que vengan a escuchar las historias de nuestro país.